I've never been the type to believe in the paranormal or any kind of superstitions. I always thought people just needed something to blame when things went wrong. But that night, I learned I was wrong. My name is Eric, and I work the night shift at Walmart in a small town in Alabama. It's a sleepy little place, nothing special, and the store's even quieter at night. Most of the customers are either the late-night shoppers or people who work odd hours, so I'm used to the eerie silence. I've been working the night shift for about 6 months, and I thought I had seen everything. But that night, I should have known something was off when I walked through the doors. It was about 11:45 p.m. when I clocked in. The fluorescent lights flickered as I made my way to the back of the store. There was a strange energy in the air, something I couldn't quite place. The store was nearly empty. I walked past the aisles and toward the back room, where the stockpile of goods was. That's when I saw him. I don't know why I noticed him at first. Maybe it was the way he was standing, motionless, staring down at the ground. He was tall, dressed in a worn-out flannel shirt and old jeans. He had a tattered baseball cap on, covering most of his face, but I could make out the sharp lines of his jaw. He stood there for what seemed like an eternity, not moving a muscle. Something about him felt off. It wasn't just the stillness, it was as if he was waiting for something, or maybe someone. At first, I assumed he was just another night shopper, maybe lost or confused. I decided to approach him. "Hey, sir," I said, trying to sound friendly. "Can I help you with anything?" He didn't respond. Not even a twitch. I took a step closer, my footsteps echoing through the empty store. The silence was suffocating. As I reached him, I saw something that made my stomach churn. His eyes were completely black, no whites at all. It wasn't a trick of the light. I could see them, staring into nothingness, devoid of life. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried to speak, but my voice caught in my throat. The man's head snapped up, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flash of something sharp in his gaze, something almost predatory. Without warning, he turned and walked away, disappearing into one of the aisles. I stood there, paralyzed, trying to process what had just happened. But that was just the beginning. Something in the air changed after that. The store felt colder. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and the silence became suffocating. It was as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I didn't think much of it at first, maybe it was just my nerves acting up, but as the hours passed, I began noticing things. Things I couldn't explain. Strange sounds from the aisles, shadows moving where there should be none, and a feeling of being watched, always being watched. I should have left. I should have called it a night and gotten out of there. But I stayed. And the longer I stayed, the more I realized I wasn't alone. It wasn't long after that strange encounter with the man that I started feeling like I was being followed. It wasn't just an occasional glance over my shoulder or the sensation of someone standing too close, it was more than that. It was as if there was a presence lurking in the store, waiting for me to turn around, to acknowledge it. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself that I was just tired, that my mind was playing tricks on me. It was around 2 a.m. when I walked past the aisles near the frozen food section. The lights flickered again, and that strange, cold feeling crept in. I glanced down one of the aisles, and for a split second, I thought I saw something move, something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow darting between the shelves. I stopped dead in my tracks. The store was nearly empty, and the only noise was the hum of the refrigerators and the faint sound of the air conditioning. There shouldn't have been anyone else in the store. I made my way to the end of the aisle, hoping it was just a trick of the light. But as I rounded the corner, my breath caught in my throat. There he was again. The same man I had seen earlier, standing in the middle of the aisle, staring at the shelves. His head tilted to the side, like he was listening for something. His hands were clenched at his sides, and his body was unnaturally still. I could feel his presence like an electric charge in the air. My heart raced, but my legs wouldn't move. I wanted to run, but something kept me frozen in place. And then, just like before, he turned his head, slowly, and his eyes, those pitch-black eyes, met mine. I couldn't tear my gaze away. It was as if something in them was pulling me in, suffocating me with an overwhelming sense of dread. "Can I help you?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't say a word. Instead, he reached out and brushed his fingers across the cans on the shelf. I watched, frozen, as the cans began to fall one by one, clattering to the ground. The noise echoed through the empty store, and I could feel my pulse racing. I needed to leave, but my body refused to move. The man didn't seem bothered by the noise. In fact, he seemed to enjoy it. His lips twisted into what might have been a smile, but it wasn't a human smile, it was something wrong, twisted, like he was feeding on my fear. I backed away slowly, every instinct screaming at me to run. But as I turned to leave, I heard a voice. It wasn't a voice from the man, it was coming from somewhere deeper in the store, from the aisles I couldn't see. "Help me," the whisper was faint, barely audible, but I could hear it. My breath caught in my throat as I realized it wasn't my imagination. It was real. "Help me, please," I froze again. It was a woman's voice, shaky and full of terror. It sounded like someone in distress. My heart pounded harder in my chest, and despite every instinct screaming at me to stay away, I followed the sound. I turned the corner into another aisle, my legs trembling beneath me. The voice grew louder, more desperate. It was coming from the back of the store, from the loading dock area. I could feel the coldness deepening as I made my way toward the sound, my breath visible in the frigid air. I should have known better. But curiosity, or maybe something darker, kept me going. When I reached the back of the store, the voice stopped. Everything went silent. There was no one there. No woman. Just the eerie emptiness of the loading dock. I scanned the area, my eyes darting from corner to corner. But there was nothing. No signs of a struggle. No woman crying for help. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the unmistakable feeling that I wasn't alone. That something, or someone, was watching me. And in the distance, just at the edge of my vision, I saw it again. The man. He was standing there, in the shadows of the loading dock. He hadn't moved from his spot, but his eyes were fixed on me. And then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Behind him, barely visible in the darkness, I could make out something moving. It was tall, too tall to be human, and its silhouette was barely discernible. But its shape, its unnatural form, made my stomach turn. I couldn't look away, even though every part of me screamed to run. The man didn't move. But the thing behind him, it was coming closer. I had to get out. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the empty store. But as I passed the aisles, the lights flickered again, and the air seemed to grow even colder. It was as if the walls were closing in on me, and I could feel the presence of something watching me, drawing closer. I didn't stop running until I reached the front of the store. I couldn't even remember how I got there, just that I needed to escape. When I looked back, the store was empty again, no man, no shadow, just the quiet hum of the air conditioning. But I knew something had followed me out. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever I saw in that store wasn't human. And it was still there, lurking in the dark corners of Walmart, waiting for its next victim. I spent the next few days trying to rationalize what I had experienced. There had to be an explanation, right? Maybe it was stress, maybe lack of sleep. But no matter how hard I tried to convince myself, something in my gut told me that what I saw was real. That thing, that presence, wasn't just in my head. It was in that store, lurking, waiting. I went back to work the following week. I didn't want to, but I had no choice. Rent had to be paid. I told myself it was just a fluke, that I'd never see that man or whatever that thing was again. But the second I walked through those automatic sliding doors, the air felt different. Heavier. As if the building itself was alive, watching me. I clocked in and went about my shift, trying to ignore the lingering dread in my stomach. It was around 1:30 a.m. when I noticed the lights flickering again. Just a slight dimming, like they were being strained by an invisible force. I brushed it off, though the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. The store was dead quiet, as usual. Then I heard it. The faint sound of footsteps, slow, dragging, like someone was walking in heavy boots. The sound came from the aisles near the back of the store, and it was unmistakable. My pulse quickened as I glanced in that direction, but no one was there. I told myself it was just a creaky floorboard, or maybe one of the elderly customers I hadn't seen. But the sound continued. Each step growing closer, but no one in sight. I turned around to walk down the aisle, trying to act normal. My eyes kept darting from one end of the row to the other. I turned into the next aisle, only to freeze in place. The man. He was standing there, right in front of me, as if he had materialized out of thin air. His body was rigid, his face hidden by the brim of his cap. But his eyes, those black, empty eyes, were staring straight at me. My heart skipped a beat. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. I was paralyzed, caught in the grip of a fear that I couldn't escape. The air felt thick with the pressure of something unseen, something I couldn't comprehend. And then, in the same quiet, deadpan voice as before, he spoke. "You shouldn't have come back." His words were like a cold hand grabbing hold of my throat. I wanted to turn and run, but my legs refused to move. I could feel the weight of his gaze, piercing through me, burrowing deep into my soul. "You should have stayed away, Eric," he continued, his voice low and guttural. "Now you've seen too much." Suddenly, the lights flickered again, but this time they didn't just flicker, they went out entirely. The store plunged into complete darkness. My breath quickened as I fumbled for my flashlight, but before I could turn it on, I felt something brush against my arm. Something cold, something inhuman. I spun around, but there was nothing there. The footsteps started again, slow and deliberate, moving all around me. I could hear whispers now, faint at first, but growing louder. It was the woman's voice again, the one I had heard from the back of the store last time. "Help me," she pleaded, but her voice was distorted, like she was trapped behind a veil of darkness. "They're coming for you." Suddenly, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as though something was pushing into me from all sides. The air was thick and suffocating. Panic gripped me as I stumbled forward, desperately trying to find the door, the exit, any escape from whatever was happening. I managed to turn on the flashlight, but the beam of light barely cut through the suffocating dark. The shadows around me seemed to move, twisting and warping in unnatural ways. I stumbled through the aisles, trying to find the way to the front of the store, but it felt like the store was changing. The aisles stretched endlessly, twisting in ways I couldn't explain. And then, I saw it again, the silhouette. The figure from before, the thing that had been lurking in the shadows behind the man. This time, I could see it clearer. It was tall, far too tall, its limbs elongated and twisted. Its shape was wrong, like a distorted version of a human being. Its face was a blur of shadows, but I could feel its eyes on me, locking onto me with an intensity that made my blood run cold. I sprinted through the store, my mind racing with fear. My body felt as though it was moving in slow motion, every step heavy, every breath shallow. I couldn't escape. It was everywhere. Finally, I reached the front doors, and in a panic, I yanked at them. They wouldn't open. I tried again, but they were stuck, as if something was blocking them from the other side. I slammed my shoulder into the door, desperate to get out, but nothing worked. And then I heard it, the man's voice again, low and cold. "You can't leave, Eric." I spun around, but no one was there. The shadows moved closer. I couldn't stay there any longer. My only choice was to run. I turned back, throwing myself against the door with all my strength, and this time, it opened. I stumbled out into the cold night air, gasping for breath. But as I turned to look at the store, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. The lights inside Walmart flickered back on, and through the glass doors, I could see the man standing by the aisles again. His black eyes fixed on me through the window. And behind him, in the shadows, I saw the figure again, waiting for me to come back inside. I don't know how I made it out alive. All I know is that I never went back to work after that night. I couldn't. And to this day, I hear whispers sometimes, especially at night, when the world is still. And I know, they're still watching. The store wasn't empty. Not then, and not now. I thought leaving Walmart behind would give me peace, but I was wrong. You don't just walk away from things like that. You don't just forget. Every night since that night, I've been haunted by visions, dreams, and the feeling that someone, or something, is always watching me. It's like I'm marked, tethered to that cursed place. For weeks, I stayed in my apartment, the blinds drawn, the doors locked, trying to escape the memories. But the nightmares came every night, without fail. The black-eyed man, the whispering woman, the shadowy figure. They were always there, lurking just beyond my reach, like some twisted ghost from another world that wouldn't let me go. It wasn't until the dreams started to feel more real that I began to realize something: maybe I hadn't truly escaped. Maybe whatever haunted that Walmart had followed me. One night, I woke up to a sound I couldn't ignore: scratching. It was faint at first, like the sound of nails scraping across wood. But as I lay in my bed, it grew louder, closer. It wasn't coming from the walls, it was coming from inside the apartment, inside my room. I slowly turned my head, dreading what I might see. The scratching stopped, and in that dead silence, I heard the whispering again. Only this time, it wasn't just the woman's voice. Eric, the voice was coming from the corner of my room, low and pleading. My heart raced, and I forced myself to turn my head, but all I saw was darkness. Then, in a rush of terror, the thing I dreaded the most happened. I saw the man. His silhouette stood just beyond the foot of my bed, framed by the dim light from the street lamp outside. His eyes, those empty, inky eyes, locked onto mine. He didn't say anything, just stared, waiting. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The shadowy figure behind him stirred, its shape contorting in unnatural ways, bending like rubber. It was closer now, impossibly tall, its limbs stretching, reaching toward me. I tried to scream, but the sound died in my throat. It felt like the air had turned to lead, heavy and suffocating. My vision blurred, and my mind screamed at me to wake up, to get out, to do anything, but I couldn't. The man stepped forward, his voice a soft rasp. "You should have stayed away, Eric. But you didn't. You never do." And with that, everything went black. I don't know how long I was out. When I woke up, it was morning, the light of day seeping through the cracks in the blinds. My heart was still racing, and the cold sweat on my skin felt like I had been pulled from some nightmare I couldn't shake off. But then I saw it, my phone. There was a new message, a single notification. It was from an unknown number. "Come back to Walmart, Eric. We're waiting for you. You can't hide forever." My blood ran cold. I didn't respond. I couldn't. But deep down, I knew. I knew the nightmare wasn't over. It wasn't just haunting me in my sleep, it was stalking me in the real world. And it would never stop until I returned. I spent the next few days trying to convince myself that it was a prank, a sick joke from someone who knew about my time at Walmart. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more the feeling of being watched grew. It was like they were right behind me, always there, always waiting. It wasn't long before I started seeing things, out of the corner of my eye, in dark places. A flash of movement, a fleeting shadow. The whispers never stopped. And every time I looked over my shoulder, I could feel their eyes on me. I had no choice but to go back. I had to know what they wanted, what they were trying to drag me into. I couldn't keep running, not forever. I drove to the Walmart late at night, the familiar roads now feeling like a path to my doom. The place looked deserted when I pulled into the parking lot, and the lights flickered above, casting strange shadows across the cracked pavement. As I stepped out of my car, I could feel the air grow cold, as if the very atmosphere around me had thickened. I walked toward the front doors, each step heavier than the last. When I pushed them open, they didn't make the usual whoosh of automatic doors. They groaned, like they hadn't been touched in years. And that's when I heard it, the sound of dragging footsteps, slow and deliberate, from the back of the store. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to leave. But something, some force, maybe, kept me moving forward. I didn't want to find out what was waiting for me in the darkness, but I knew I had no choice. The store was empty. The aisles were lined with unopened boxes, untouched stock. It was like the store had been abandoned, except for the presence that hung in the air, thick and oppressive. And then I heard the voice. The whisper. Eric, I froze. My blood ran cold. It was coming from the back of the store, near the loading dock. I didn't want to go there. But my legs moved without my permission. I rounded the corner, and that's when I saw it again. The man. He stood at the end of the aisle, facing me. But this time, he wasn't alone. The figure was there too. And it wasn't just standing in the shadows anymore. It was moving, crawling toward me, its long, twisted limbs dragging across the floor with an eerie scraping sound. The man tilted his head, his black eyes gleaming with something hungry. You shouldn't have come back, Eric, he said. Now you belong to us. I didn't know what to do. My body was frozen in fear. The thing in the shadows was getting closer, and the whispers grew louder, more desperate. They weren't just voices anymore, they were screams, deafening and inhuman. I turned to run, but the door slammed shut. It wasn't just locked, it was sealed. I was trapped. The lights flickered once more, and in that moment, I understood something. Walmart wasn't just a store. It was a doorway. And once you walked through it, you could never truly leave. The shadows closed in. I thought I could escape, that somehow, I could break free from this nightmare. But there was no escape, not from this place, not from whatever it was that had claimed me. As I stood there, staring at the man with the hollow eyes, I realized the truth. Everything that had happened up until that point, the whispers, the shadows, the cold, it was all part of something bigger. Something older. Something that didn't just live in Walmart. It lived in the cracks between worlds, between what's real and what isn't. The figure in the back of the store was getting closer. Its long, twisted limbs dragged across the linoleum floor, a grotesque crawling motion that shouldn't have been possible. The thing wasn't human. It didn't look human, it never had. Its face was nothing but a blur, a mass of shifting shadows, but I could feel its eyes boring into me. It was feeding on my fear, growing stronger with every passing second. I tried to run, but my legs felt like they were made of lead. Every step I took seemed to bring me closer to the shadows, as if the very store itself was pulling me in. The man with the black eyes didn't move. He stood still, watching me with that twisted, predatory smile. His voice echoed in my mind. You can't run, Eric. There's nowhere to go. I felt a cold pressure in my chest. The air around me was suffocating, and I could feel the weight of something, an unseen force, pushing me toward the center of the store. I didn't know how to fight it. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was something else, something primal. It was as if my very will to live was being drained, piece by piece. The shadows reached out, cold tendrils stretching toward me, wrapping around my legs, my arms, pulling me into the heart of the store. I gasped, trying to fight against it, but I couldn't. It was like I was drowning in the dark, suffocating in the emptiness that seemed to spread from the very walls. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the man spoke again. "You belong here now. You're part of the store. You're part of the darkness. And you'll never leave." His words echoed in the silence. They were final, cold, and absolute. But then something shifted. The air grew colder still, and I felt a sharp jolt, like electricity running through my veins. The shadows hesitated, their grip loosening for a moment. I don't know what happened next, but in that brief moment of clarity, I felt something. Something that hadn't been there before. A presence, one that wasn't as cold, as malevolent as the rest. And then, just as I thought I was done for, a voice pierced through the darkness, sharp and commanding. It was deep, rumbling, like thunder from below. "Get away from him." The shadows recoiled, pulling back in terror as if they were afraid of something. The man with the black eyes twisted his head, as if searching for the source of the voice. But it was too late. Whatever it was, it had arrived. From the far corner of the store, I saw something move, something tall and imposing. At first, I thought it was another figure, another nightmare to add to the list. But no. This was different. It was the thing that had been whispering to me all along. The woman. But not in the way I had expected. Her form was twisted, her body was bent and broken, but her eyes, they were glowing. Bright, unnatural, piercing through the darkness. She reached out with hands that seemed to glow with a faint light, pulling the shadows back, pushing the black-eyed man away. "I warned you," she hissed, her voice hoarse and ragged. "You took him once. You won't take him again." The man snarled, but he didn't approach. He stood there, eyes locked on her, hatred burning in them. "You think you can stop me?" he growled. "You think you can save him?" For a moment, the store was still. The air was thick with tension, the smell of stale air and something metallic, something almost like blood. But there was no answer, no more words. The woman raised her hands, and the shadows recoiled further, like they were being pulled back into some dark hole. The black-eyed man turned and started to retreat, disappearing into the depths of the store with a final, hateful glance. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My heart pounded in my chest, and my mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. Who was this woman? And what had she done to push the darkness away? But before I could process anything, she turned to me, her glowing eyes fixed on mine. "You're lucky," she said, her voice soft but terrifying. "You don't belong to them yet. But you almost did. You almost gave in to it." I opened my mouth to speak, to ask her what was going on, but she stopped me with a raised hand. "No more questions," she said. "The door has closed for now. But it's not over. It never is." I tried to say something, to thank her, but she was already gone. She disappeared into the shadows, leaving me alone in the now empty Walmart, which seemed oddly still and silent. I looked around the store, my chest tight, my mind spinning. The doors were open. I could leave. But I knew, deep down, that whatever happened that night, it wasn't the end. The door had closed for now, but it was only a matter of time before it opened again. The darkness was still there. Waiting. I don't know if I'll ever be free of it. But I know one thing for sure, once you walk through the doors of Walmart, you're never really alone. And there are things we'll never understand, waiting for you on the other side. The days passed, but the nightmares didn't stop. I thought I had escaped that cursed store, that I had left the darkness behind. But it was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the black-eyed man, the twisted figure in the shadows, the woman with the glowing eyes. And no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for me. Waiting to pull me back. It was about 2 weeks after that night when I saw it. The message. It was the same as before. The same unknown number. But this time, it wasn't just a simple message. It was a warning. You think you escaped. You think you're safe. But it's only just begun. You belong to us, Eric. You always have. You will come back. And when you do, there will be no escape. My blood ran cold. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what it was, or who was sending these messages. But I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't keep running. They were coming for me. And I had no choice but to go back. The night I returned to Walmart, it felt different, darker, colder, as if the very air around me had thickened. I parked my car in the same spot I had parked the first time, in the same deserted parking lot. The lights above flickered, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. As I walked toward the entrance, I felt the familiar unease gnawing at the back of my mind. The door opened automatically, but the sound it made as it slid apart was unsettling, like it hadn't been touched in years. The store felt abandoned, hollow, empty, and yet I wasn't alone. I stood there for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest, trying to calm my nerves. But then I heard it, the same dragging sound, the same footsteps from the night I had left. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the back of the store. I wanted to run. I wanted to turn and leave, but I couldn't. Something was pulling me forward. The store seemed to shift around me, the aisles stretching and warping as I walked deeper into the darkness. The lights flickered again, and I saw him. The man. The one with the black eyes. But this time, he was different. He wasn't standing still like before. This time, he was walking toward me. His face was still obscured by the brim of his cap, but I could feel his gaze, those cold, empty eyes drilling into me. You shouldn't have come back, Eric, he said, his voice low and raspy. But now that you have, you won't leave again. His words sent a cold chill down my spine. I could feel my body tense up, my instincts screaming for me to get out, to run as fast as I could. But my feet were glued to the floor. You belong here, he whispered, his voice thick with something dark. You always have. Before I could respond, the shadows around us began to move. They shifted and writhed, as if they had a life of their own. I could hear them whispering, calling to me, dragging me toward them. I tried to resist, but it was like I was caught in a web of darkness. It wrapped around my legs, pulling me closer to the figure in front of me. But then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, I heard her voice. The woman with the glowing eyes. Stop. Her voice was stronger now, more commanding. The shadows recoiled, as if afraid of her presence. The man with the black eyes turned toward her, his expression twisted with rage. You can't stop this, he spat. He belongs to us now. He always has. The woman stepped forward, her glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. She raised her hand, and the shadows recoiled even further, shrinking back into the corners of the store. She was different this time, more powerful. The thing that had been feeding on my fear, the thing that had been dragging me into this nightmare, she was fighting it. You don't understand, she said, her voice full of something ancient and powerful. This place isn't what you think. It's a doorway. A portal between worlds. And once you're marked, there's no going back. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want to know what she meant. But I had no choice. The walls of the store seemed to close in around me as I listened to her words, feeling the weight of her warning pressing on my chest. There are others, she continued. Others who were lost. Others who came before you. And they're all here. Trapped. Bound to the store. And soon, you will be too. I wanted to scream, to run, to get away from her, from the man, from the darkness. But the words held me in place. And what happens when I'm trapped here? I finally asked, my voice trembling. The woman's face softened, but her eyes remained cold, unblinking. You become one of them, she said softly. You become part of the store. Part of the darkness. A shiver ran down my spine, and I felt the fear in my chest grow tighter. There was no escaping this. There never had been. Walmart wasn't just a store. It was a place where lost souls were trapped, where the boundaries between life and death didn't exist. The black-eyed man stepped forward again, this time much closer, his breath cold against my skin. He smiled, that twisted, predatory grin. You're mine now, Eric. Forever. I tried to fight back, but the darkness had already taken hold. It was pulling me in, suffocating me. The woman, the one who had tried to warn me, reached out one last time. Don't let it take you, she whispered, before her form dissolved into the shadows, leaving me alone with the man and the nightmare that had become my reality. I tried to scream, to run, but the shadows closed in. They were everywhere now, suffocating me, pulling me into the depths of Walmart. And I knew, deep down, that there was no escape. No way out. I was one of them now. Trapped, forever, in the darkness of Walmart. The end, for now. I thought I had lost everything. My body was paralyzed, frozen in the grip of darkness, as if my very soul was being ripped apart and woven into the fabric of the store. I could feel the man's cold, invisible fingers wrapping around my soul, pulling me deeper into the void. But then, something changed. A sharp jolt, like an electric shock, coursed through my body, breaking the hold the shadows had on me for just a moment. The air around me grew colder still, as though the very atmosphere had frozen in place. The black-eyed man staggered back, his face twisted in disbelief. What is this? He muttered, more to himself than to me. I didn't have time to think. I didn't know what was happening, but I felt something deep inside me, a flicker of resistance, a spark of strength that had been dormant for far too long. I had no idea where it came from, but it was enough to make me move. Without thinking, I ran. I pushed my body forward, through the aisles, ignoring the darkness that reached for me, ignoring the whispers that echoed in my mind. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know how I could escape. But I had to try. The man's voice called after me, a low growl, full of hatred. You can't run, Eric. You're already ours. But I ignored him. My heart pounded in my chest, and every instinct told me to keep running, to push through, no matter the cost. As I rounded the corner, I saw it, the door. The front door of the store, the one I had tried to escape through so many times before. It was there, in the distance, just beyond the aisle. But this time, it wasn't locked. It wasn't sealed. It was open. And I didn't hesitate. I ran toward it, faster than I had ever run in my life. I could feel the coldness closing in around me again, the shadows scraping against my skin, the whispers getting louder. But I didn't look back. When I reached the door, I flung it open with all my strength and stepped out into the parking lot. For a moment, everything was still. The air was fresh, and the cold night wind brushed against my skin. I gasped for breath, feeling the weight of the darkness finally start to lift. But I knew it wasn't over. The store, the shadows, the man with the black eyes, they would always be there. They would always be waiting for the next person who dared to walk through that cursed door. I turned and looked back at the Walmart. The lights flickered once more, casting eerie shadows across the parking lot. But I didn't stay. I didn't look back. I didn't know if I had truly escaped or if I had just stepped into another nightmare, one that would never end. But I knew this, the darkness would always find its way back to you, no matter how far you run. The only way to truly escape was never to step foot in that place again. And for the first time in a long while, I realized that some doors are meant to stay closed. As I drove away from the store, I glanced in my rearview mirror one last time. The lights flickered again, but this time, I didn't feel the weight of the darkness on me. I had made it out. And as I drove into the night, I knew one thing for sure: the door to Walmart may have opened once, but it would never open for me again.